Thousands of Native Americans are murdered and missing and forgotten.
I want to tell you about a problem in the state of Oklahoma. One so pervasive that mothers have learned to prepare themselves for what feels like the inevitable.
He said, "Mom, why do you want to take my picture?" And I said, "Takota, because if something happens to you, I want a current picture of you in case we have to find you."
The people that grew up there have become desensitized to it.
It's strange that everyone seems to be okay with just letting people disappear.
And the various agencies that are supposed to handle it are overwhelmed.
Here in Oklahoma, a lot of them are case overloaded. A lot of them, when they started the position they had, we were already at 600 people missing.
We didn't get the attention as Indigenous missing or murdered. It was ignored. It was avoided.
Often these problems mean families go years without their loved ones being found.
April 17th. Will be 22 months since he's been gone missing.
They didn't give a shit about him. They left him out in those woods. And I couldn't bring him home.
And so many murders go unsolved.
They still have not gotten justice.
These are all the missing and murdered Indigenous people in Oklahoma. While this happens all over North America, Oklahoma has this perfect storm of issues that has caused this crisis to spiral. There's a dark history of forced resettlement and assimilation at the heart of it, and complications with legal and political rulings that have caused so many victims to fall through the cracks, which has consistently left families with more questions than answers.
We continue to have hope that he's going to be found. You have questions that are unanswered. It sends your emotions all over the place.
Everyone here is trying to comprehend the unimaginable, but how did we get here? What has been done and what more needs to happen to find those missing, bring families justice, and finally solve this epidemic? I just wanted to take a quick second to thank today's sponsor, Storyblocks. I spent a lot of time going back and forth between Oklahoma and driving all over the state and talking to all the people you'll see in this video, and none of that would have been possible without sponsors. It's actually a service I use and something that you'll see and hear throughout this video. It's one of my favorite subscription services I have, which offers over 1 million assets for one price. You can find all kinds of things on here. I especially love to use the sound effects to layer in my sound design. You can use the plugin right in Premiere and it downloads the file and adds to whatever folder you select. There's also a wealth of B-roll, templates, music, and so much more on here. I actually keep a folder on my master edit drive full of assets I've downloaded because they always come in handy. One of the other great things is the licensing is worry-free. One price and everything on here is at your disposal to create better videos. To get started, you can go to storyblocks.com/Cory Popp or click the link in the description. No surprise, it helps me in the channel if you do that, so I can keep telling these stories. Now, let's get back to it. Alicia's daughter, Skye Jim, disappeared when she was just 15 years old.
One day I came home from work and her older sister told me that she was gone. When that happened, you can't think clearly and fast enough. You know, like, what do you do?
When she went to file a report, the police didn't take her seriously.
At first they weren't going to take a report. They gave me the feeling that they just thought that she was a juvenile delinquent and had just took off with friends.
This is a common theme among these stories. Parents frantically looking for a child only to be met with skepticism and a lack of action.
They wouldn't listen to. They didn't believe me when I told them that this was not something that she would do.
Skye's story is unique. Unlike many of the other missing stories, Skye was eventually found, in large part due to her mother's efforts, but not before experiencing significant trauma, something that would affect the rest of her life.
I know that she went through some very traumatic things that she didn't reveal, and I think that she really was struggling with that.
Skye went missing again 15 years later, but this time she didn't make it back home.
I went out and there were several police officers there, and it didn't sink in at first. I didn't realize until I believe I asked if she made it or she's okay, and they said that she was gone.
Alicia has been searching for answers for 3 years since her daughter was found unresponsive on a highway. The police closed the case, telling her there was nothing to investigate, despite numerous questionable circumstances surrounding Skye's death.
It's just so disgusting how hard it is for someone to not only lose their baby, she was my baby, you know, but also to have to deal with those things too is just beyond understanding.
This indifference to Native cases by local agencies isn't an isolated incident. Robin's son, Takota, was found on this country road outside of Oklahoma City.
According to the neighbor, this area right here is the general area of where Takota was found.
He was shot 8 times. The investigating officers took the first 48 hours off.
The second day, the homicide detectives, the 2 main ones, took the day off. That is the most crucial part of a homicide investigation.
Robin has been doing everything to try to find justice for Takota ever since.
Every law enforcement officer in the state of Oklahoma that investigates an MMIP, MMIW case should investigate it like it's their own child. Because if you were investigating these homicides like it was your own child's homicide, we'd have a lot more cases solved because you would do everything that you could until you had it solved.
Mary's son Dan went missing June of 2022.
My life has not been normal since my son's been missing.
The family has organized searches and pleaded for help, but nearly 2 years later, Daniel remains missing.
We've looked out there, we've searched at the lake, but it was just getting the authorities to do something to search. And it just seemed like all things, whatever was out there, evidence, it's cold, it's gone.
Dan's wife passed away not long after, in large part due to the grief surrounding Dan's disappearance. Mary has felt that especially hard.
When I met Tiffany, she was the perfect wife for him. She treated him good. I just wanted to bring my baby home so I can put him to rest next to Tiffany.
Tiffany's passing is a harsh reminder that the violence reaches far beyond the initial victim. The trauma ripples out to the families and beyond into the entire community, leaving everyone vulnerable. It's a cyclical problem that has been happening since this crisis began.
When you become a victim, sometimes that trauma and the horrors you go through is something that is perpetuated. So that's also very tragic in all of this.
These cycles aren't new to the state of Oklahoma. There's a troubling history that has caused intergenerational trauma within the Native American community here.
Oklahoma is Indian territory. This was, in a harsh way of speaking, called, quote, the so-called dumping ground of Native Americans.
In the 1800s, the U.S. government forcibly removed Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States and relocated them to present-day Oklahoma, then known as Indian Territory.
This was the place that they were pushed to, and through treaties promised by the United States government that this would be their reservation or their home.
But of course, these treaties were violated, and settlers were allowed to displace those in Indian Territory, leading to more chaos and violence.
We were forced here and then given these little plots of land to exist. And then bit by bit that was stripped from us by the state.
What's so tragic in all of that is it turns into cycles of violence when a people try to survive and they dehumanize another people to displace them, to take their land and resources and claim it as their own.
On top of this, the U.S. government started forcibly removing children from their families and sending them to boarding schools where they were stripped of their cultural identities.
These schools were foreign entities with a mission to, quote, civilize, but in my words, to hijack our children.
That became like a policy, the termination with the motto of kill the Indian to save the man.
Abuse ran rampant at these institutions. Children were beaten for trying to speak their language. Many died.
They were tortured when they spoke their native language.
We lost a lot, not just our loved one, but we lost a lot through that process. And a lot of it we can't regain.
Oklahoma housed more than any other state, which has a lasting legacy here.
We were taken from our homes. We were made to assimilate, and we were forced into boarding schools, and we were murdered and we were raped. You know, all those things happened to our Indigenous people in our history, and that still affects us today.
This is not in some lost history. There are elders alive today who experience that. We're still trying to recover from that, and we're just now really recognizing and understanding that and trying to find ways to address that. But in the meantime, we have all these vulnerabilities because of that.
There is a lot of generational trauma coming from it because so many people were housed there. A lot of victims have family members who are at residential schools.
These systemic problems, deeply rooted in the state of Oklahoma, have led to ongoing socioeconomic disparities, leaving Native American communities more vulnerable to violence and exploitation, and causing some of the highest rates of alcoholism and addiction of any group.
We all know what happened, and we know how it affects us today with all of the substance abuse and alcoholism, all of those things.
Because we weren't allowed to be who we could be. We have, a lot of mental health caused by alcoholism and addiction. People that never even done drugs or drank, but they're still having to deal with that side effect of it.
There are many of us that are hurting, including my own. And so you have that cycle of addiction.
This plays a part in the crisis, sometimes in unexpected ways. The investigating agencies seem to treat cases differently if the victim had a history of drug or alcohol abuse, which leads to complications in finding those missing or solving murders. Travis's mom, Cara, disappeared from a truck stop 2 years ago.
My mom struggled with drugs.
Travis feels this played a part in the lack of action from law enforcement.
It felt like the police were constantly using that, to just assume she was a terrible person. And honestly, she's the victim of life. It's very unfortunate that they would use something like that. And because people make mistakes doesn't mean their life is any less valuable.
But there's something else at play in Cara's case and many of these other cases. Something that hits at the history of Oklahoma as Indian territory, and something that has wide-ranging effects on criminal cases involving tribal nations members.
The Mcgirt ruling.
The Mcgirt decision.
The Mcgirt case.
Mcgirt.
Cara's case was initially handled by local law enforcement, which did little to help. But because of a Supreme Court ruling known as Mcgirt, Cara's case can now be handled by tribal nations police, which had no real authority prior.
The tribal police have called me. Well, they want to hear my side of the story. They want to hear, we had actually done an interview and recording with them, and where the police didn't want to even do that at all.
In July 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark decision in the case of Mcgirt versus Oklahoma, which has had far-reaching implications for the state's criminal justice system and its relationship with Native American tribes. The case centered around Jim C. Mcgirt, a member of the Seminole Nation who was convicted of sex crimes in an Oklahoma state court. Mcgirt argued that because his crimes were committed on the Creek Nation's reservation, the state lacked jurisdiction to prosecute him and that he should have been tried in federal court. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court agreed with Mcgirt, ruling that a large portion of eastern Oklahoma, including much of the city of Tulsa, remains an Indian reservation. The decision was based on the fact that Congress had never explicitly disestablished the Muskogee Creek Nation's reservation, which was created by treaty in the 19th century. Instead, the state began asserting criminal jurisdiction and state rule over the eastern area more than a century ago, simply proceeding as if the reservation had been disestablished. The main point of the ruling was that the federal government and the state of Oklahoma had been violating tribal rights for more than 100 years. It finally gave back the tribal nations the ability to govern themselves. Along with this, though, it has affected the police and criminal jurisdictions throughout the state, which has caused a lot of confusion amongst law enforcement agencies and the communities they police. While tribal leaders have seen the Mcgirt decision as an opportunity to assert greater sovereignty and control over their land and resources, and to police themselves, Oklahoma's governor spoke out about the ruling with alarming rhetoric, saying, among other things, that it had turned Oklahoma into a lawless state. The problem with the governor's rhetoric was that Oklahoma already had a precedent prior to the ruling of not finding Native missing and murdered. It was already a lawless state as far as the indigenous population was concerned.
I've been watching this and knowing all along that my daughter, along with others, who died in the jurisdiction of the state of Oklahoma, and they failed her. He has said that there's no equal protection under the law because of the Mcgirt ruling, but for Skye, there's been no equal protection under the law.
And Governor Stitt has been remiss in his reaction to the case. Instead of working with tribal organizations and law enforcement to try to get a better understanding on how this is going to affect all of us, he's not seeing that all of this is hurting people.
The governor's approach to the ruling has caused numerous problems with these cases. The state decided to implement the ruling overnight, meaning tribal nations law enforcement, which were never allowed to police themselves prior, were all of a sudden being asked to handle cases they were not prepared for. They've been working to catch up ever since.
Even when the Mcgirt was in court, we were trying to prepare ourselves. But we still didn't have enough time, we didn't have enough resources. But after the Mcgirt and the crisis of case overloaded, now they're starting to get more money. Now they're starting to get more resources. They're starting to hire more officers.
Despite Governor Stitt calling Oklahoma lawless, Mcgirt has actually created more law enforcement agencies throughout the state, with tribal nations police being able to assist state agencies now.
It is not lawlessness. Now we're allowed to not only represent ourselves as a sovereign nation, we're able to defend it, to protect our people, but we also back up their law enforcement.
Cherokee Nation Marshal Service, we got a lot of resources to look for these people and to help these agencies. We're not going to take it over, but we will be there to help to find, because the longer you wait and you don't reach out, it doesn't turn out good.
The governor has done little to enact policies that would help enable this, and the toe-stepping amongst agencies because of that has let ego interfere with solving cases. Jen felt this especially hard when her son Kelby went missing.
I called Henrietta Police Department. They went to the apartment, they talked to the roommate, they followed up on a couple of leads. At that time, they called me and said because he was Native, I had to file a missing persons report with Creek Nation.
That mothers have to deal with these bureaucratic failures while their children are missing is unconscionable.
I had to talk to 3 or 4 different investigators and had to repeat the whole story over and over and over, and none of them knew what the other one knew. I mean, just within a week. That's not how that's supposed to go.
It took volunteers and outside help to finally find Kelby. People like Jacob Wynn, who has become a specialist in rescue and recovery, a specialty desperately needed but lacking throughout the state agencies in Oklahoma.
Jacob, he has been the biggest blessing. I mean, Nagoshi, from the very first time I spoke to him, made me feel like my son's life mattered.
Jacob and other MMIP advocates have stepped up to help families navigate the jurisdictional issues, apathy, and lack of communication from agencies when dealing with the missing or murdered loved one.
We will continuously stand and be the voices that no longer have a voice. We will continuously be with the families as they fight for justice.
It's not stopping. It's not going to stop. We just need more support that the tribes build their own MMIW organization so they can help their people.
Shima's son Jackson went missing January of 2023.
He just loved people. He loved his family, his friends, and he just loved making other people happy. And throughout this journey of him being missing has been one of the most difficult experiences that we've ever had to endure. It's hard to process. It's hard to believe that this has really happened.
Though her initial interactions with the police were largely negative, these advocates helped right the ship.
She was the one that dealt with a lot of jurisdiction boundaries. Johnson didn't want to release it, and it took me going to the BIA, and now the FBI are involved, which we knew that should have been in the beginning.
Jackson's case is an example of how law enforcement could work in the state. Despite an initially rocky start, with the help of advocates, the local agency allowed the FBI and the BIA to come in. And just last week, charges were brought against a potential suspect in Jackson's disappearance.
They want to help the family. They want to help the victim. More than anything, it's about the victim. It's about finding your loved one. It's about finding your child or your wife or husband, whoever is missing. It's about them first. And we, on the other side of it, the ones that are looking for them, we have to check ourselves and put our egos aside. Whether it's jurisdiction, non-jurisdiction, you know what? It's better to work together, because those divisions like that, it's not helping the victim.
Jacob and other advocates hope that with more resources, cooperation, education, and awareness, there could be a path forward with solving this side of the epidemic.
The only way this will work is if we all work together. Because the only people that suffer are the victims and their families, which are victims as well.
They need to work together. If they had that many people working together, I feel the family would have closure a whole lot sooner than what it's doing now. Families shouldn't go years without having closure with their loved ones.
Beyond that, the advocates in this community believe addressing the issues with addiction and mental health will play a huge role.
In addiction, of course, more desperation comes in, and then people begin preying on each other.
And finally, that reconnecting the next generation to the culture that their ancestors were stripped of will help heal some of the wounds left behind by the intergenerational trauma.
A lot of us have stepped up, took an accountability, for things that have been done not only in the past, but the way we want things in the future. And this is not what we want for our children, our grandchildren.
I don't want to perpetuate that violence anymore. And I don't want my children, especially my daughters, to be at risk anymore, to be a target.
This is not just my son that's fallen through the cracks here. There's more Indigenous people that are. It's now my time to not just get louder about my son, but also all these other victims and do everything that I can.
While this speaks to ensuring a better future, in the meantime, there's still murders unsolved and children and loved ones still missing.
My world is not comfortable without my son in it. So the only comfort that can be given in that area is if his case is solved.
It's hard. Sometimes I take it moment by moment. I had a dream. He knocked on their door. He said, "I'm here, Mom." I don't know if I'm ever going to see him again or if they're ever going to find him. That scares me the most, of not finding him.